trip we went to Alaska was nice.
You went to Alaska?
When?
We should
Tuesday, yeah.
in your bed?
Yeah, we just went for a day cruise.
A day?
Well, we stayed longer than a day, but that's what this friend of mine wanted to go, and that's how long she wanted to stay. She just wanted to go see the 29 villages that she wanted to do.
Wow.
Huh? Yeah, they have it's a 5-hour cruise. Actually, it's 8 hours because it takes the farm for the bus to get you there.
Where does it start from?
Anchorage.
Anchorage to, oh, so you flew out there and then you went on a cruise and then, I was gonna say, you can't take a cruise up that long.
No.
It takes longer than that.
That'd be one fast boat.
You wouldn't see glaciers along the way, just because you can.
Yeah, we saw Alaska, but it was fast.
I know I met people that, they took the train from Canada, and then they took different people go
We
to
took a cruise
Yeah,
up there and
she
then
took
flew
the
back.
cruise. That's
Yeah.
what she did, she took the cruise.
My husband's done the Canadian cruise.
Well, you almost passed me a,
Anybody has any questions?
thank you.
From this sound, can't throw people things.
So you flew up to Anchorage.
Next day, we got the bus. Drove us about 3 hours to get there, which was a good scenery. Anybody have any question whether they're not or not, all they have to do is
Oh, it's gorgeous.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
Yeah, that's a place I want to go.
put that on your bucket list.
Put that on my.
Yeah. Go earlier in the fall than we did. We went, the last one.
Oh, yeah.
The rain.
Well, let's open with prayer. Lord, we thank you for this new day, and we thank you for the chance to read the book of Ezekiel. Thank you for each other and this class and the fun that we have. We pray, Lord, that you'd bless our study and bless our time together. So hear our prayer in the name of Jesus. Amen. Okay.
Paul, I have a question before we get started.
Yes, Lily.
You know, when I was looking over this and going back to chapter 1, and as I noticed, and I looked, I said, now, that's kind of odd, where it says, and I saw visions of God.
Yeah.
Now, you know, with a lot of the other lessons we've had, no one has mentioned about a vision of God. They have visions of this, a vision of that.
Yeah.
Vision of God.
Yeah.
How can they have a vision of God when nobody knows what God looks like? We always say God is love, God is this or that.
Yeah.
But now, visions of God?
Yeah.
I'm like, But I, went further, in chapter 8, it talks about the vision also in connection with this, and chapter 40 is mentioned about it also. But that just kind of struck me, and I have to mention it.
Well, that's right, because that's a very big deal for the Hebrews. Unlike nearly every other culture idols were essentially little statues of their gods. Right there in the Ten Commandments, you shall not make for yourself a graven image of any likeness in heaven above or the earth below. In other words, God does not want to be represented by his creation. That would again be like, I've used this illustration before, that would be like representing the maker of a pizza with a pizza. There's a difference between the creator and his creation, which makes this vision in chapter 1 rather stark. Now you'll notice that God isn't, there's a figure on the throne, but all of these elements of the vision are there to identify God. And the point of the vision is that God has left Jerusalem. And we talked about that last week, how God has left Jerusalem and the presence of God is moving. That's why they've got the 4 cherubim with the wings and the wheels, and this is God's throne on wheels. And in a sense, it's kind of like again, the tabernacle in the desert, where that was God's throne in a tent that moved along with his people. But that's part of what makes the vision so striking, was that God wasn't supposed to leave Jerusalem. And so that's kind of at the bottom of this vision, that why is God here in Babylon? And what does he have to say? And why is he talking to Ezekiel? So that's really where all of this is going. So it's a good question. But you're very right that we don't have visions of God himself. And I think this is, again, because of, well, here's the difficulty. What does God look like? And if we're told not to, if you look at Michelangelo, it looks like an old man. That's running afoul of what the commandment has to say. Well, why is the commandment so strict on this? And it's because God says, do not confuse me with my creation. Which is us. Now, we're made in his image, but that doesn't mean, see, the problem we have is that when we represent God with an element from creation, we diminish him. And so, but that leaves us with a problem, because, well, if you stop and you think about this, everything that our minds grab onto are elements of what we've experienced. So we know what people are, we know what animals are, we know what chairs are, we know what tables are, we know what cars are, we know all of these things. Well, can we know what God is visually? Can we represent him? And so here God says, don't represent me with the elements of creation. Well, why not? That's all we can do. And God says, yes, I understand that. But the point I am trying to make is, you cannot reduce me to what I have made. Now, my glory, the book of Isaiah, the whole earth is full of his glory. His glory is here, is seen through in the stuff, but he is far beyond the stuff. So that's why this vision is so interesting. Now, if you get to, say, the beginning of the book of Revelation, it also begins with a vision. But remember, that's a vision of Jesus. And so Jesus is, Jesus is, in a sense, a low-resolution view of God. Well, what do I mean by that? It means that Jesus reveals God, but even Jesus can't reveal all of God because he is beyond our ability to comprehend him. And then we think, well, how can that be? Well, think about a 2-year-old. 2-year-old looks up at their parent. Or even a 5 or a 6-year-old. I remember at some point my children, we had met somebody or something, and my children were like, don't you know them? My children just imagined that I knew everyone in the world. Now, in some ways, my life was, then you're talking to a child and you tell a child, don't do this. Well, why not? Well, you've got reasons why, and you know why, but you know your child can't necessarily understand why. And so you say, just obey me. At some point, that doesn't sit well with the child. But there also is a certain amount of wisdom to be gained that, okay, if I can understand the limitations of a child knowing his parent, then I can, by analogy, understand the limitations of me knowing God and why I should obey him. Now, hopefully, the child trusts the good parent when the parent says, don't do that, because it's not good for you, you can't handle that. So God says, don't imagine you can diminish me into some construct of what you've pieced together from creation. Think about, say, the Babylonian god Marduk. The Babylonian god Marduk, for example, was supposed to have eyes all around his head. Now, what might that mean in terms of Babylonian mythology?
Can see everything.
Can see everything, okay? What have we done to construct Marduk?
Put eyes around him.
Put eyes around his head in order to symbolize and represent being able to see everything. And God is in a sense saying, don't do that to me, because I am not a construction of yours. You are a construction of me. Now, especially we moderns who think so much of ourselves are offended by this. Well, what's the source of our offense?
Sinful nature.
Yes, we think we're so big. We think, in a sense, we're like the teenager who looks at the parent and says, oh, I've been listening to you all my life. What do you know that I don't know? The wise parent might think, maybe a thing or two. Because I remember being 18, and I remember having that thought. And now I think back on my 18-year-old self and say, I didn't know so much. So, is it conceivable we don't know so much? So, here we are. And so that's why this vision is stark, but also the vision, you'll notice, is a little circumspect about God himself. The vision goes into great detail describing the chariot. I mean, to get the communication across that this is the God of Israel, but we're not going to really, he's bright, okay, but that doesn't tell us anything.
You look like fire.
You look like fire.
And isn't that like they were wandering in the desert? That Moses would talk with God and come out glowing.
Oh, that's right. And so God sometimes represents himself in some different ways. For example, the burning bush is one of the most striking representations of God. And again, it's fire. And then when God describes himself in the book of Exodus, I am a consuming fire. And, I'm going to talk about this a little bit in the sermon today. Well, what is an altar? What does an altar have in it? It has fire in it. And again, if you remember the story of Leviticus 9 and 10, this fire comes from God and it's supposed to be perpetually lit. So what is a sacrifice? The sacrifice is a substitution for us, which is the animal, who goes into the fire. Well, what happens when an animal goes into the fire? It's consumed. And this is an image of us in God's presence. And we can't go into God's presence. But that then the animal now has absorbed the presence of God and made the payment. We struggle for words to get these images right. But that's how all sacrifice works. That God can live in the midst of his people because the animal is taking the hit for the people. And then, of course, you set up Christ. He then takes the hit for us. And so that's how all this stuff is constructed. Well, that's a good question, Lily. And,
I don't know if it makes sense. When she was talking about the vision, why do we all vision God as being he? Where did that come from?
That is a long and complicated question.
I'll come back next week. No, I'm just kidding.
Why the male for God and not the female? There's a ton of interesting theory about that in terms of order and chaos, in terms of context, in terms of the culture he's talking to. If God had chose to reveal himself in a matriarchal society, would he have been a mother? Here's the thing. The Bible consistently says God does not have sex. Now, I don't mean sex as act. I mean sex as God is not male. And right there in Genesis 1, it's made clear. Because he gives his image, in a sense, he takes his image and he splits it in terms of male and female. So there's something about God in maleness, and there's something about God in femaleness. But why does he represent himself as male? And so standard answers for that have traditionally been it's the context of the culture he's talking to, that it wouldn't have made any sense if he had represented as female. There are other theories about maleness and femaleness in terms of other mythologies, and so how the Hebrews would have heard that. So that's a huge question. But the traditional Christian answer is basically God represents himself as Father, Son, because of how father sons were situated contextually for that. But there's nothing necessary. God is not male in the sense of male and female. God is...
Interesting that when Jesus was born, then we see mother, son.
That's right. And Sophia, you get into the Old Testament, and wisdom. And Sophia in the Old Testament, wisdom is kind of connected with Logos in the New Testament. And Sophia is female in the Old Testament. And Sophia is an image of God. And so it's a complicated question. And as people want to call God mother, it's like, yeah. The first thing we need to say is God has no sex. He's not male and female. And both male and female come from him. So the second thing to say is that God represents himself this way, and since we know so little about him, we tend to let him pick how he wishes to be represented and follow that, and take the cue from him. So, and part of it's, now we have our own cultural context where this is hotly debated and charged. So that's part of the conversation too.
Now, when I was growing up, they always taught us that when we use he in the Bible, that it means both.
That's right.
That's what we were taught as a kid. We mean both. But then I just started to question it and said, okay, well, how come they always say male? But I know I was talking to the he being both male and female.
Oh, that's right. And traditionally in our language, which was common, so there's sex and there's gender. And traditionally, sex refers to male and female. Gender referred to language, male and female. Now, in English, we don't have a lot of gendered words. In Spanish, la mesa is feminine. La silla is feminine. El perro is, although dogs have sex, and so that gets complicated. But el carro, which is the car, is masculine. And I remember when you learn Spanish, it's like, why do things have gender? Well,
Same in French.
Same in French, same in Greek. Although Greek has masculine, feminine, and neuter. So you have some things in Greek which have no gender. Right. And so you get into all of this stuff. And in English, man used to be the generic for male and female. And about 30 years ago, people began to take offense to this. And so now we talk about human and people, and because you don't want to just take unnecessary offense to things. But in Spanish, ellos, which is masculine, means both male and female. Ellas, it means them. If you use ellas, you mean only female. But if it's ellos, it can mean either male or a male group of male and female, but not only. So in other words, there's a capacity for gendered language that non-gendered language doesn't have in terms of specificity. So when you are taught, he, in a sense, knowing God, kind of was the neutral. And you have this, so that then caused all kinds of problems with Bible translators, because in Greek, sometimes andros means specifically male, and anthropos means male or female. And so Bible translators now, if it's andros, they'll translate it male. If it's anthropos, they'll translate it people, because people get offended if, like in your King James Version, they just say man then. Language is a living thing, and it keeps moving on. And we might not always like the changes that come, but when they come, you got to deal with it.
In the book, The Shack, which was really popular a few years ago,
Right.
she tries to do that. She has, the name is Papa for God, but it's portrayed as a female.
Right.
So try to bring both in, which gets pretty complicated.
And then this gets, but, so then you get into the New Testament, and the New Testament talks about we are sons of God. And then people say, oh, that's, how can Edie be a son? But part of the problem is that the language was intended because when they're talking about sons of God with respect to inheritance, in that culture, a son had a different status with respect to inheritance than a daughter. And so it's important to not lose that nuance because that's very much in the meaning of the text. So it gets complicated. And again, 50 years ago, a woman could very easily stand up and say, I'm a son of God, and nobody would think anything of it because they all understood she wasn't talking about her sex. She was talking about her status. So,
I think of Sons of Anarchy.
yeah.
And,
Which is a TV show, right?
yeah, I've never watched it, but that just came to mind. You could be a woman and be a son of anarchy.
Exactly.
So it does trickle down.
That's right. And you might refer to a woman, well, she's a son of a, well, and we all understand what that means. Now, you'd say she's a daughter of a, and then the phrase just doesn't have the same meaning. And so, this is language, and this is change in language, and so then to figure out what to do with it. Go ahead, Marty.
In conclusion, then the Greek only had male and female.
The Greek had male, female, and neuter.
Okay, and neuter.
And so there's the Greek. The Greek's a very sophisticated language, so it had male, female, and neuter. It also had active, and passive, but then it also has middle, which we don't have in English. And there's lots of middle verbs in Greek, and so English translators, how are we gonna? We don't have it in English. And there's 5 words for love in Greek, and there's 1 in English. So the nature of language, and what they say, like the Inuit have how many words for snow and ice? Garden and field. That's important in the Genesis story. Well, what's the difference between a garden and a field? Okay, so size.
It's personal.
Well, here's something. When you think about a field, what do you think of? Okay, now there's the difference. Is it wild? Well, where does Jack grow his rice?
In a field.
In a field. Or is it cultivated?
So a garden is for your personal use or your personal pleasure more than a field.
What would you call a nursery? A nursery. So yes, the language has all of these nuances, but when you find the language in Hebrew in the Bible, well, what are the nuances of the culture that wrote it? I mean, because that's really the big question in terms of translation. Well, how can we appropriate it? Because, I mean, here the question of field is an interesting one, because is a field a wild? Now, if I'd say meadow, what would you think of?
Lower grass. I mean,
Grass.
animals, cows.
Okay.
Wildflowers.
Okay, you would probably think more wild
Yeah.
rather than field.
Cultivated.
cultivated. And those nuances are important, especially in the Genesis story, where they're in a garden, and they're kicked out of a garden, and they're out in the field. Well, what does that mean? And so this is the kind of thing that keeps pastors in business. Any more questions?
I've had enough for today.
Ezekiel.
End of chapter 1. Then you can see the verses are the second half of verse 28. Verse was not split well. This is the appearance of the likeness of the glory of the Lord. That gets into Lily's question about the vision in chapter 1. This is the appearance of the likeness of the glory of the Lord. Now, what is glory? It comes from a Hebrew word, kavod, which also means weight. If we say something is a weighty matter, now that's a really interesting group of words, because what is matter? Aren't there two meanings of matter?
Well, what the earth is composed of.
What the earth is composed of, and
Does it matter to you?
exactly. So something is a weighty matter. Well, isn't that interesting? Because weight, if you go into the doctor's office and he wants to know your weight, what is he asking for? How much matter you have. But if we say, well, this is a weighty matter, what do we mean?
Heavy subject.
Very different, way heavy on very.
It's heavy. It's, go ahead.
No.
It's significant. It's important. This is complicated. In some ways, this is beyond us, but we have to grapple with it. And so, this is the same word in Hebrew as glory. Now, we, I think, culturally tend to think of glory as light. Now again, here's another little. You go to the grocer and he says, here's 2 pounds of grapes, and you feel it and you say, this is a little light. Isn't it funny how these words and their multiple meanings, well, why would this be? Why are these words so complicated? Well, because these words have been used in connection with this text and our language and meaning for thousands of years, and these connections are not accidental. If you say, well, that's a light matter, what do you mean? It's no big deal. So, but we tend to think about glory, well, glory and light as in not light, but light, brightness, that connects, because that's what's here, but it's brightness and weight. Isn't this interesting?
My mother was an optimist, but she would often say it was such a glorious day.
Yeah.
Or such a glorious morning.
Yeah. And what do we mean by that?
Special, something really special.
Special.
Beautiful. Extras. More than what usually is.
What does glory prompt in us? Awe. We when you say it's a glorious morning, what does that mean? You walked out your door, or you opened up the blinds, and you did what?
The sun shining.
Fresh air.
Birds are singing and the air is cool.
That's right. It caught your attention. It wasn't common.
Right.
Now you have the Old Testament system of clean, unclean, common, holy. She might have opened up the day and said, this is a holy day. Now, if your mother had said that, what would she probably be referring to?
Sunday.
Sunday. This is a holy day. This is a glorious day.
It could be a beautiful day.
Could be a beautiful day. Beauty is in the mix there. So this, now Ezekiel sees this and says, this is the appearance of the likeness of the glory of God. You know, he even steps a step away from it. The likeness of the glory of God.
Appearance of the likeness.
That's right.
2 steps away.
2 steps away. He's hedging, you know, he's a priest, okay? He knows the rules. He knows that, okay, he's had a vision, and it's amazing. And again, if you just Google Ezekiel 1 and Google images, whoosh! I mean, artists have been trying their hand at this thing with some amazing results. And they keep doing it because someone does it and they look at it and say, I don't think that quite gets it. So they try their hand at it. Or another person tries their hand at it. There's probably not going to be a definitive representation trying to illustrate what's in words here. And again, there's something to be understood by that. This is the appearance of the likeness of the glory of the Lord. When I saw it, I fell face down and heard the voice of someone speaking. Well, why does he fall face down?
Fear.
Awe, fear, worship, terror, all those things. Where have we heard this before? Moses. Yes. Moses comes upon the burning bush, and the voice says what?
Your shoes off.
Take your shoes off. You're on holy ground. Now, why take your shoes off? Why did they whap Saddam Hussein's statue with the bottom of their shoe? What were they saying? What's on the bottom of your shoe? If I came up to someone and said, lick the bottom of my shoe.
Dirt.
That's right. And in terms of what would I be doing in terms of my status with respect to that person or that person's status? Assaulting them, humiliating them. Take off your shoes. You're on holy ground.
The guy who she was Bush, remember that?
What's that?
Bush was in some country and got threw a shoe at.
Oh, that's right. That's right. I threw a shoe at. I completely forgot about that. That's right. Yeah. Threw a shoe at Bush. And we Americans thought, well, that's
Weird.
That's weird. But everyone in some folks in other cultures would say, oh, so offensive.
It wasn't nice.
It wasn't nice. I heard the voice of one speaking. He said to me, Son of man. Oh boy, Son of man. Now here we talked a lot about Son of Man in Daniel. There's again, we're talking a lot about words today. So, Son of Man. Words have what they call ranges. So when we talk about Daniel and Jesus, Son of Man very much connects with Daniel 7. Son of Man can also just mean human being. So, Son of Man. Janice says good morning, by the way. Son of Man, stand up on your feet and I will speak to you. Okay, what's going on now?
I don't know why he asked him to stand up. You and I are like same level.
Probably not that.
It's raising him up.
It's raising him up. He's
Equipping him.
okay. Yeah, I know you're afraid, but
Put your fear aside and listen to what I have to say.
exactly. If so imagine you're a king in a throne room. Someone comes into the room. What do they need to do first? Bow. This morning, Manuka, who was one of the Tongans, came, and I just recognized this morning because I've learned a little bit about some of these cultures. He called me big man. Now, what did that mean? Now, I'm big.
You're tall.
I'm tall, but that's not what he meant. Why did that? What did that mean?
Kind of like a reverend.
Boss, exactly. Because he wanted to talk about, because they're renting the church, and want to talk about paying the rent. And so now you might say, well, again, this is the culture that he's from. You call someone, you treat someone with respect. And, when you watch them come in for worship, they're wearing their costume and they're dressed, and this is all communicating status, and this is the fabric of a culture, okay? But we Americans have lost so much of this. So you come into a throne room, you bow. My doctor is Asian. A wonderful man. I think I'm a little older than him. And he knows that because he knows how old I am. Well, I noticed once when I was watching this Korean drama, in Korea, when you refer to someone older than yourself, you use slightly different language than you refer to someone younger than yourself. It's a sign of respect. Again, we don't have that in our culture. Yeah, we do, but
I got old at work, they start calling me Miss Joanne.
only folks who've been raised right, like you, Joanne.
Oh, well, I don't know how they was raised, but all of a sudden after that, you know now.
But so when the doctor comes in to see me, he comes in and he bows. And, just very quickly. It's been so built into him, obviously from youth, that he's Chinese, in terms of his answers, he just and greets, and this is, so when you go into a king, you bow. Now, this is the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords, so he's flat on the ground. Stand up, I need to talk to you. Yeah, I know you're scared. Deal with your fear on your own time. You're my servant. I can't have my servants just all laying on the ground when there's things to do. So stand up. Okay. So he spoke, stand up on your feet and I will speak to you. I'm not going to speak to the top of your head. Stand up. As he spoke, the Spirit came into me and raised me to my feet.
Yeah.
What does that mean? What's going on?
You want to give attention.
That's right. But why?
The Spirit's empowering him.
The Spirit's empowering him. Without the Spirit's power, he can't even do this. And I heard him speaking to me. He said, Son of man, I am sending you to the Israelites, to a rebellious nation that has rebelled against me. They and their ancestors have been in revolt against me to this very day. Pause. What are we talking about here? Okay, you're going to see this up in the sermon too. Remember how, what do you remember from the book of Isaiah?
Chapter 5, the vineyard.
Chapter 5, the vineyard. If I say MDG, what do you think of?
Misery, deliverance, gratitude.
There's a new thing I'm going to drum into you until you can never forget it.
I thought it was my very good dog. That's what.
MDG, not MGD. My good dog.
And listen, if you live with my dog, you know that.
The dog has you well trained.
Yes, she does.
Okay, so now this is a representation. This is a representation from Genesis 1 of the world, right?
Right.
What's up here?
To heaven.
Heaven. You've got the seas and the dry land.
The throne.
And the throne is up here.
Yeah, but Jerusalem.
The Jerusalem is here, and that connects with God in heaven. And now Ezekiel's way over here in Babylon, and here God comes from Jerusalem to Babylon. That's why he's taken his chariot throne and flown over here to Ezekiel there. And he says, well, let's go back to where this whole story begins, in the Garden of Eden, where there is no, what isn't there in the garden?
Temple.
No altar. Because it's a garden. Means it's the garden of what?
God's garden.
It's God's garden. This is God's garden. And the man and the woman, the gardeners, do what? They enjoy it first.
They work it.
They work it, they cultivate it, but then he says, don't eat of this tree.
They rebel.
They rebel. Now, when God starts Israel, what's the point of starting Israel? Israel is to undo the rebellion. And so that's why Jerusalem and the temple, and in a sense it puts a little hole here where the connection can be made, where God in a sense can once again reign over the earth like it was designed to do. Now what does God say about Israel right here in verse 3? I am sending you to the Israelites, to a rebellious nation that has rebelled against me. They and their ancestors have been in revolt against me to this very day. What is he saying?
Things haven't worked out the way he had done.
Exactly. This is in a sense the story of Genesis 5 and the flood. This is Genesis 11 and the Tower of Babel. This is a story that's told again and again in the Old Testament. Israel was to be my chosen people, a nation of priests, as it said in the book of Exodus. The nation was to be my priests, and the whole earth was to know me. And through Israel I was going to undo the rebellion, but there are rebellious people. They're like everyone else. They haven't connected with me, and so, well, what are we going?
If God's going to them, they're not going to God.
That's right. And so they're rebellious people. The people whom I am sending you are obstinate and stubborn. Say to them, this is what the sovereign Lord says. And whether they listen or fail to listen, for they are a rebellious people. Just in case you've forgotten, again, how does Hebrew make emphasis?
Repetition.
Repetition. Repeat, 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 repeat. If it's a deep hole, you say it's a deep hole. If it's a very deep hole, you say the hole is deep, deep. If you say the hole is very, very deep, or the deepest hole, you say it's deep, deep, deep. That's why the vision of God is holy, holy, holy. Why would you say holy three? You could say most holy, that's how we'd say it in English, but in Hebrew it's holy, holy, holy. They're rebellious, they're rebellious. Have I mentioned they're rebellious? do you got that yet? And whether they listen or fail to listen, for they are a rebellious people, they will know that a prophet has been among them. Okay, what's he saying?
You got a message to bring and they're not going to like to hear it.
That's right. You got a message to bring. They might listen, they might not listen, but what?
They'll know you've spoken. They know God's spoken.
They'll know God has spoken. They will know that a prophet has been among them.
Yeah.
Now, if, you're Ezekiel at this point, you're thinking, oh. I mean, and again, if you read the prophets in the Old Testament, it's so funny to me when people are like, I want to be a prophet. I'm thinking, are you out of your mind? Do you actually read the Bible? Do you know what God puts his prophets through? Well, you're going to get a big taste of this in Ezekiel, because it isn't pretty and it isn't fun. Because, in a sense, God is saying, I'm going to give you a job that's going to make you completely unpopular, put you in abject poverty, and you'll probably be killed for it. Is there a big line behind that job? Accepting applications. In fact, in this vision, the vision of Jeremiah and Isaiah, God kind of leaves room for them to volunteer. He's not giving Ezekiel a chance to volunteer. He's just saying, this is what you're going to do. Well, look at Jonah, right?
Yeah.
God says to Jonah, go to the Ninevites. Tell them 40 days and you'll be overthrown. Jonah's like, I don't want to do it. He goes the other way. Does God let him off the hook? No. Storm comes up. Oh, it's me, guys. It's causing the storm. Throw me overboard. No, we don't want to do it. Throw me overboard. They throw him overboard. It's like, I'll get out of this by suicide. God says, what?
Nope.
Nope, you're not taking your life. I'll send a fish to swallow you. And he'll keep you and vomit you up on the shore. And see, this is the picture of God. It's like, well, I'll avoid him. Good luck. If he's determined, you're not going to out-stubborn him. So, all right. Whether they listen or fail to listen, for they are rebellious people, they will know that a prophet has been among them. And you, son of man, do not be afraid of them or their words. Do not be afraid. Though briars and thorns are all around you and you live among scorpions, do not be afraid of what they say or be terrified by them, though they are a rebellious people. What's going on here? You notice all the repetition? Now, here's the thing. If someone says, now, I'm going to send you someplace, but don't be afraid.
You're exactly.
Exactly!
And then when he says it 2 more times.
They said it 2 more times. Now don't be afraid, but they're going to hate you. And it's going to be like living among briars and thorn bushes and scorpions.
But don't be afraid.
But don't be afraid.
Gonna run the other way.
Poor Ezekiel. And it's like, well, here it is. This is what you're being called to. Oh.
Isn't this just like the military, when they send the troops overseas to fight, and yet a lot of them haven't been away from home before, but yet they have to go.
Yeah.
And, a lot of them are scared, but they have to do what they're told to do.
Yeah. So, do not be afraid of what they will say or be terrified by them. Though they are rebellious people, you must speak my words to them, whether they listen or fail to listen, for they are rebellious. Again, in case you haven't noticed, they're rebellious. But you, son of man, listen to what I say to you. Do not rebel like the rebellious people. Open your mouth and eat what I give you. Oh boy, well now what's coming?
It's not going to taste good.
It's not going to taste good. Then I looked, and I saw a hand stretched out to me. In it was a scroll, which he unrolled before me. Both sides of it were written words of lament and mourning and woe. Oh. And he said to me, Son of man, eat what is before you. Now, does this remind you of Isaiah? That's right. The lips. Anything else that reminds you of something in the New Testament?
Lord's Supper.
Lord's Supper. We eat. Peter. Kill, eat. Now, so there's a lot of debate. What do we mean by the eat and the eating and all of this? Well, Hebrew scribes, they didn't eat scrolls, but we sometimes talk about chewing. Here, let me give you something to chew on. That's still in our language, isn't it? Now, when I say, let me give you something to chew on, do I mean that literally? Am I going to give you a stick of gum? What do I mean? Mull over it. Ruminate on it. Now, ruminate, where do we get that word from? Cows. So Edie knows cows. What do cows do?
They chew their cuds.
They chew their cud. All day long, they sit there and chew. You know why they have to chew so much? Well, you know how much food value grass has?
Not much.
Almost nothing. Like chimpanzees chew, 12 hours a day. And they have these huge barreled stomachs. Why?
Lots of beer.
Well, they have to, lots of fiber. That's what they need to try and derive some nutrients out of those leaves. Now, we as human beings, how do we get around that? You know what we do? First of all, we don't eat leaves. We cook. We have fire. And so what does fire do? If you were to eat meat, if you were to kill a cow and trying to eat it raw, pretty hard to digest. Cooking breaks it down. So here's a scroll. Eat it. Well, what's in the scroll? Lament and mourning and woe. Said, Son of man, eat what's before you. Eat this scroll. Then go and speak to the people of Israel. So I opened my mouth, and he gave me the scroll to eat. Then he said to me, Son of man, eat this scroll. I am giving it to you. Fill your stomach with it. So I ate it, and it tasted as sweet as honey in my mouth. Then he said to me, Son of man, now go to the people of Israel and speak my words to them. Why is he eating the scroll? What does this mean? Are you going to take it literally? What's that? What is he intending to communicate with eating a scroll?
God's given him the word.
That's right. And for Hebrews, so back in the day, we don't memorize anything anymore because we have it on our smartphones and books and the internet and things. But back in the day, if you wanted to teach a student something, you taught them memorization. And so Hebrew students would sit there and memorize, and they called that chewing. Why did they call that chewing?
Over and over again.
Over and over. And how do you memorize? It's like chewing. You just keep chewing until you've digested it, until you can spit it back. And in a sense, what he's saying here's the scroll, and it's complete. It's written on both sides. Learn the whole thing till it's memorized, till it's in you. And then you're going to go and you're going to speak it. And what's the content of it? Lament and mourning and woe. Oh, this sounds like fun.
It doesn't say it, that's his message, it doesn't sound sweet as honey.
No. Well, and once there's something kind of funny about that, because do people sometimes like being the bearer of bad news?
Yes.
Yes,
Yeah.
they do sometimes. When?
Well, it depends on who they're talking to.
Yes, it does, doesn't it?
And who they're talking about.
And who they're talking about. People sometimes love being the bearer of bad news, right? In the long run, is it sweet? Though it might taste sweet in the moment, it's not sweet in the long term. So we'll break there, and we'll get into chapter 3. And we mentioned the people are rebellious.
A few times.
But don't be afraid. It'll be like being among briars and thorn bushes and scorpions. Now think about that image. I mean, what do you do when you're around briars and thorn bushes?
Try to get out.
You're very, very careful. Now add scorpions to the mix. What do you do when you see a scorpion? Run! and so here's the image. You're among briars and thorn bushes, and then a scorpion comes, and it's like, he says, Ezekiel, here's your life. Oh, I thought God was going to make things wonderful for me. Not for Ezekiel. Again, I mean, culturally, we have these images of, read the book. So y'all want to study Ezekiel. There you go.
That was my idea.
Thanks.
Briars, thorn bushes, and scorpions.
Don't be afraid.
But don't be afraid.
I'm not afraid.
And try not to be rebellious.
Oh, that's hard.
All right. We have...
Put a purple stripe around it. It's supposed to keep the scorpions from crossing.
A purple stripe, really?
Well, they put them around the houses, or they sleep in the roofs.
Really?
In the summer.
Does it work?
That's the idea. I don't think it works perfectly, but maybe it helps some.
It must help or they wouldn't do it. Wouldn't be surprised. Well, we had our questions at the beginning, so maybe we'll pray now. Lord, we thank you for this book that speaks to us from a different place. Lord, we are busy with ourselves, And we have a very Freudian view of you, which we project ourselves onto you and are quite pleased with that. But if we actually wish to know you apart from ourselves, we shouldn't be surprised that what we find isn't what we choose. And so here in the book of Ezekiel, we're learning about poor Ezekiel and his call to a rebellious people who won't listen and who shouldn't be afraid of them, although it's briars and thorn bushes and scorpions. And so we pray, Lord, that this book might teach us, and we might know you, and we might know our own times, and we might know how to be faithful in them. So hear our prayer. In the name of Jesus, amen.